حي على الفلاح.
Imagine we have this mockup. To implement it in React, we're using Think in React 5 steps. Step 1. Break UI into components. Step 2. Build static version. Step 3. Identify what should be a state. Step 4. Identify where a state should live. And finally, Step 5. Add inverse data flow. Breaking the UI implies we need to identify our components and subcomponents, and then we arrange them into tree-like representation. The container component will hold all our components. We have the header component, which holds the logo, search input, and dark mode button. Add new is a component for adding new to-do. Then we have main body, which holds to-dos, and to-dos, which house the individual to-dos. And here is the result. Use single responsibility principle and you can build the app top down or bottom up. We will start with the container component all the way down. As you can see, this is a React project. First, we create a folder for all our components, and here is our container component. You know what? I'm going to speed up this step. See you in a second. And finally, here is our static version. Steps 3. Identifying what should be a state variable. Simply start with this question. Does it remain unchanged over time, or can it be computed from existing state or props? Answering yes to this question means probably these are not state. Here we have identified all of our state. Step 4. Identifying where state should live. Remember, React uses one-way data flow. We can only pass data down from parent to child. To identify where state should live, follow these steps. Identify all components, use that state, and then find a common parent. Here, we decided to put all our state in the container component. And now, to display our to-dos, we are going to first save them in a state array. Essentially, what we're doing is iterating over the array to display them wherever we want. So, we need keys to uniquely identify each element in the array. We're using NanoID library. Note, array map method allows us to iterate over the array and perform whatever we want. In addition to that, it does not change the original array. Okay, now let's do it. First, we import useState from React. Here's our to-dos state array with 3 initial objects with ID, text, and date. Then we pass it down as props to our child component. Here, we loop over our array to display each object in the array as a single to-do. Then we pass the object properties required. And finally, receive them in the to-do component and display them. Step 5. Adding inverse data flow. Up to here, we can only pass data down from parent to child component, but sometimes we need to pass data from child to parent component. And now, since our dark mode button leaving the header component, and because dark mode should be applied to all components, the state should be in the container component. And then we can pass a callback function to child component, which will call set state. Note, callback is a function that we pass as an argument to another function, and is called after the main function is executed. Another important JavaScript concept you need to know before we proceed is template literal, also known as template string. And what it does is it provides an easy way to combine variables and expressions into strings. There are multiple ways to implement dark mode button functionality. Here, we're using useState and CSS. First, we declare Boolean state variable, and then we need a div to apply the styling to. In CSS, we will set the required styling, and finally, we pass the setter function to child component. In the child component, here we attach the setter function to onClick event to fire when button is clicked. And there you have it. With this code, what we essentially doing is we want the CSS styling to be applied based on the state being true or false. And now, let's enable adding to-dos. First, we need the button to open the pop-up module whenever the button is clicked. Before we proceed, note, in React, we can conditionally render using these. Now to start, we first create a state boolean, and then if the state is true, this part will be displayed, and if not, nothing will be shown. Lastly, we want to attach the setter function to an event to be fired whenever the button is clicked, and here is the result. What we essentially want is whenever the user typed here to be added to our state array. First, we need to capture what the user typed. To grab input data, create state variable and associate it with the input. Now, we need to pass this data to parent component where to-do's state array lives. Remember, we do that using callback functions. So in the parent component, create a function and pass it down to grab the data needed. Remember, our array is made of these objects with these properties. So we need the same format. Remember, in React, data is immutable. We cannot modify the array. We use the spread syntax to copy the array and add the new object we just created. And voila, our new to-do is rendered to the screen. To delete a to-do, we need to first identify it. So we pass a callback function to grab the ID of the object to be removed. And then we need to somehow remove that object and display the rest. Of course, there are many ways to go about it. But here, we're using array filter method, which evaluates the condition on all objects in the array. And we get a new array. When we build UI with React, we first break the UI into components, and then we identify what should be a state and where it should live. React data flow is unidirectional from parent to child. To change the flow, you can use a callback function.